I picture home as like where my family is. I don't think it necessarily means like a building. I feel like it's who I'm with. When I went through university and I lived with other people, I didn't find that I wouldn't have ever said that was home. Just because of who it was. Yes, I was living with people, but it wasn't like family. So to me, I don't know, home I would say is with family.
Home is where my wife is, or home is where my parents are. So I wouldn't imagine, like, I picture my childhood home where the place is, but the first thought that comes to mind is that's where my parents are. Mm-hmm. And then when I think of my day-to-day life home, that's where Holly is. Where she is where home is for me, because it's where I want to go back to.
I wouldn't say that home is too much of like a building or a location. And I don't know, like, I think sometimes, like, I'm a bit of a home bird, but it's not like I need to be, like, actually, like, at my parents' house. I just need to be, like, with people that are comforting to me. So, like, my sister and, like, Cal and my boyfriend and, like, my parents. For me, home is, like, kind of, like, my really close family. And maybe that's because I feel like I can be, like, just the most myself with them, and I don't have to put on any, I don't have to impress anyone or put on any, like, show,
Home used to be Ayr. Like, that's where I was, like, my whole childhood. That's where all my friends were. That's where all my family were. And now, like, I'm in Edinburgh and I'm in a lovely flat with my friend, but it's like, I wouldn't even, like, I wouldn't say home, like, back in Ayr is home anymore. And I wouldn't say here is home. So in a weird way, like, as I've grown up, I feel like I kind of put home on people. Like, say, for instance, my sister Kirsty, like, she is very much like, home is somewhere I feel safe. And I think I put, or like, somewhere I feel like I can just breathe and be myself. And like, I don't have any like expectation on me at all, or like really any kind of pressure. And really, she is like one thing in my life that I do feel like that. Like, I know if I'm seeing Kirsty, everything's fine.
I see myself as a person who is very much introverted, that don't meet people, right? And then the more I think about it, I was like, home is all about people. I find transitional moments between going to Poland and coming back here very, very difficult. So when I go there, I'm thinking I'm leaving home behind, home here, and I'm going to be missing what I have here, my safety. But when I'm coming back from there, I'm feeling exactly the same feelings, but in a different sense. So even though I feel like a home there, at the same time, I'm in the one leg at home, and then I'm in the one leg here, and I'm always in between. So I don't think I have a one home.
In my head, I've got like two homes. Like, I've got home, and then I have what I go home to every day, and they are two very distinctly different things. Like, there's always like clarification there. If somebody's like, "Are you going home?" I'm like, "Yeah," but I'm not going home though. Like, I'm just going to where I stay just now.
It's tricky. I've always thought of home as like people, in terms of like friends and family. Coming into my early 20s, for sure, I think I seen it as like a person. I kind of viewed it as like, this person kind of like feels like home, or like friends feel like home. That's where you always kind of feel like quite comfortable, and same with family. Like, no matter kind of where they'll move, it's always gonna be there, and you can be in that vicinity and still feel like you're at home with those people.
I think because I've only ever been in the one house. Mm-hmm. I've only ever lived in the house that I'm in just now. And I don't have any other memories of a home apart from this one. So it's where I grew up and, where I have all of my core memories. And I think my physical home is the best definition of home for me, because it's always been where I've called home. And yeah, I think that sort of consistent building of home is my home, I think. And it's nice to feel like there's a really rich history of like my whole life in this house. Feels like I made my home in the home, if you know what I mean. Like, the idea of having all of the people in the house as well, I think, makes it feel more homely.
Like growing up as a kid, it was like, okay, this is home. Like, this is what we're taught home is. That's what home is. So here it is. It's the house that I grew up in with my mum, and that's home. That's my home address. That's what gets put down on paperwork. That is home. And then when I moved away and moved out of home and then had a new home, meaning as in a different house, that was really when like the displacement kind of felt, because I would come back to my childhood house and it no longer felt like home because I was living somewhere else, but then where I was living didn't feel like home either. All come from me, so home has kind of become somewhere that I choose to make home. It's like, okay, it doesn't come from another person, it comes from where I feel safe and secure, and it's okay if I mess up, it's okay if I break, like I am in a safe space to break. And that is pretty much what home is. It's that like first comfort zone. It's that place where you can just go.
I feel like home isn't one place. I think home is wherever I am, basically. Home is somewhere where I am, where I can be completely just myself. But home is also somewhere you can always go back to. So I always think of like safety, solitude, slight chaos. But like calmed chaos. I know that makes no sense, but it is. It's like your own chaos.
That's a good question, and it seems like it should be a very simple answer, but it's not quite as simple, because I spent the past 8 years living in Stirling, but in those 8 years, I don't think I stayed in one flat or one house for longer than about 18 months. Before then, I'd spent my entire life in the same house, and loans, the same house that I'm living in now. So that, kind of is, even when I was still living in Stirling, I would still refer to this house as home. But I would picture it more broadly as just being by the sea, because I obviously grew up on the coast. My grandparents live on the coast. It's very strange for me to not be walking distance from the coast. Feel this connection to the seaside and to, even just like the views of Ailsa Craig and Arran, even from the other side of the Firth of Clyde, even from Kintyre, even seeing that, just, I don't know, there's something in me to make me feel like I belong. Just, I've spent my whole life with that sort of view, and my whole life connected to that view, that landscape. I suppose forever I can be close to my roots, I suppose, or have that sense of belonging, which I think for me is definitely connected to being on the coast.
Having moved away from my childhood home, I know that I still very much enjoy going back to Troon, and probably the view as much as anything. Just the sense of kind of peace and shelter that comes with sitting in that window and just looking out at the sea and watching people walk their dogs and what have you up and down the prom, and the however many tens of thousands of hours I must have sat in that window watching the seasons change and things like that. That is something that I think of, but I also think of as an extension of that, probably Troon Beach at low tide. there's an embedded memory of me walking Lucy along that beach after I got back from Australia in 2017, and I woke up stupidly early. So I just took her for a walk, and it was a beautiful early August morning. I think that's a memory I go back to a lot, and I guess that's associated with the concept of home, because I'd come back from Australia. I felt the most at peace, I think, in that moment. But equally, though, I have my flat in Glasgow, which is my home, although not for much longer. So you're catching me at an interesting time when I know that when we got the eviction notice, I think I immediately kind of descended into a sense of panic, because I feel like knowing that this, arbitrary, tenement flat in Glasgow, of which there are thousands like it, but this one was mine, was no longer mine. And so it'll be interesting when I move into the new place, whether, because I actually own it and I'm not just a tenant, that foundation of a sense of home will shift, because that will be my space, and I'll finally actually be able to redecorate and paint the kitchen and things like that.
The inside of my flat is home. It's where I'm most comfortable. It's where I can be and not have to dress up and act how I want, listen to me, it's my little safe space. But I wouldn't necessarily say that I would say East Kilbride feels like home. It just feels like where I live. Whereas Old House feels like home for me. So if I've had a bad day, Drew will say, why don't we go for a drive up to Whiteley through Old House? So it's like I said, and I maybe only lived there for 4 years. Quite a small percentage of my life, but I've moved a lot. So I've moved, born in the middle of Glasgow, and my dad always lived in Glasgow, so I've almost got a foot there as well. So my dad stayed in the one house all my life, but that doesn't really feel like home that much, in the sense of I never feel called to it for any reason. But with Mum, I think I've moved house 8 times in my life. But Old House, the village, that feels like home. Right. Like my little primary school and the pub, and I know, the little park. That's where we had our sports days. So that's home.
I think especially the longer I think you're away from the place that you grew up, your friends, they kind of move on, and you're not part of them moving on and their life anymore. They're getting married, having kids, and so they're going through major life transitions, and you're not part of that. And therefore that severs a connection of what home is. And so even though everything is familiar back in Adelaide, it doesn't feel quite the same anymore. And I think that will only get more pronounced as time goes on.
I mean, we always viewed it in the place we grew up. But I think that can split and go with people wherever they go, in terms of wherever your friends are moving to, that little piece of your home is going with them.
I suppose in that way it's not necessarily a house. I think a lot of it for me at the moment is a house or a place because it's just me. I think that also adds to why I've got home and then home. And homes where people are.
But it's interesting as well, sometimes when I'm here and when I feel homesick for Poland, the way I experience is through details in my environment. So for example, just such a small little things that you don't really think about, but they make me miss when I'm in Poland, like I said, when I smell the air, it's like, oh, I'm here, hello. And it's very difficult to translate for what it means. It's in the details. That's what it is. It literally, the way the strawberries tasted. The strawberries taste different in Poland. They taste in Scotland. How strange is that? And how can you answer what's come to you is in the taste of strawberries?
Things where you could consider the concept of home being the place that you were born in or you grew up in, the place where you've got all your family and friends, or you could think about the place that you feel most culturally connected to. Mm-hmm. And I think they're all valid concepts. And I think because I've like moved in the last 5 years at a very pivotal moment of my life, I'm like, what even is home? What does that mean? But like the very idea of home is like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. I kind of hadn't thought, but it is, yeah. I guess it really is tied to like how you view yourself and like your place in the world, I guess, or in your country.
But having moved, I now weirdly like picture the place as well. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of people, they can't wait to, leave where they're from, or, they don't really picture a country sort of thing as home. They never really viewed it that way. And I suppose kind of growing up, I didn't see it that way initially, but as I've gotten older and having more of appreciation of the country itself, and traveling around it and being up more in the Highlands a bit more, I view it as like one big whole now. It's like how can you miss a place? Do you know what I mean? Like, especially like a place you've maybe not necessarily lived and you've maybe just visited for a few days. Like, but it's just part of your home country, and but it just feels like overall kind of like a home. But I think now kind of it's merging all nicely into one thing. I don't think home can ever really be one thing.
I know that my ancestors have been here forever. There was like the drive between Dunoon and Strathgar for some reason also is just a part of Scotland that I feel like it's almost it's in the DNA, how familiar it feels, and how a sense of calm. Doesn't matter what the weather conditions are when I'm passing through that valley. It just it feels like it's, I don't know, part of what I'm made of was dug out of the rocks there.
Probably like sort of Cromarty, Inverness for a strange reason. Don't know if it's because I've got so much history there, but I'd say that I feel quite at home, quite safe at Cromarty. And then Jude and Dave's as well is just a kind of haven. As soon as you sort of go into the driveway, everything washes away. I always think of it like the part in the Gringotts Bank where you go under the waterfall and it erases any spells. That's what I think happens when you drive into the driveway at Fannyfield. So those would probably be the two other places, location-wise, that feel like home to me.
But even like here, like I've only been here 4 years, and like when I come home to Scotland, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get home and come back here. And then I'm here, and I won't have come to Scotland for a while, and I'm like, I want to go home for a day, and then I'm like, okay, no, I want to go home, and I go to the other home.
Even though I didn't feel at home in Australia, I knew that in the summer months when the garden was starting to grow again, and like the tomatoes and the beans and stuff like that were coming on, I would just sit there in the dawn from 7 o'clock through to 8:30 and just get through a whole pot of tea, just sitting there, just drinking it and just listening to the birds in the garden and kind of stoating about in my pajamas and my slippers, just picking away at it. So I feel like that garden was probably more home than the house was.
I'm not a private person, but I like my own space, and I like knowing that I have control of my own space. I think that's really what makes a home feel like a home for me, is knowing that it's my space. So I think my flat in Dundee is definitely my own space. So it feels very much like it's mine. And I like the independence of being able to sort of show up at my flat by myself and know that it's there for me. And it's almost the same thing in reverse. Like if I need somewhere to go, it's there. Yeah, and it's like a grown-up home almost. This is like my childhood home, and then my flat is like my grown-up adult home.
At the conception of this project, my main focus was looking at the feeling of displacement which can occur in your 20s when you're trying to pin down where home is and how that changes as you grow, as you're finding your feet in your own place in the world. But after speaking to so many people about this, I quickly came to realise that home is simply a concept. It's completely unique to the individual, and it can't be tied to just one place. It's the amalgamation of so many elements that make a home. And really, it's what you make it. So, home is safety, home is warmth, home is love, home is familiarity, home is identity, home is privacy, home is comfort. And for me, in particular, home comes in the small details and tiny moments, such as the sound of a sewing machine, or it's the sound of dogs' paws on a kitchen floor, and it's the smell of my Nana's house, which is home-cooked meals in Chanel number 5. It's the smell of a horse and the sound of hoofbeats. It's as simple as a winding road that is so familiar that I feel like I could drive it blindfolded. It's 1,000 tiny moments. That's what makes home.
Home. If I had been asked 4 months ago, I would say home is my house and the parents who live there. The house in which my parents have lived for 25 years and I for 17 and several summers. It's where I grew up, found my passions, learned to make friends, explored fashion choices that made my heart sing, later made me cringe, and which now I have learned to cherish. My family home is my circle of standing stones, a monument to visit, in which to spend religious events with family and to bask in the comforting fortitude and warmth of its stone and its keepers. It will always be home. I have never felt any of my flats in Glasgow to truly be home. They are always temporary, moving on after a year or two. It seems futile to mould yourself around walls that will never be yours. But returning to Glasgow after a break has offered a new perspective. They say you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. And boy, did I miss the mottled red sandstone with its soft facets feathered by years of rain. My ears tingled at the dulcet tones of Scottish blethering. I relished the familiar cracks in the pavements worn down by the walking of pale-faced or orange-slathered people. I soaked in the sun cracking through grey clouds from the precise angle I expected, and I crossed the road without looking, because I just know. I think home is, in part, knowing. Knowing like the back of your hand. I know the house I grew up in, I know the town, feel the memories attached to every corner. I feel home in that house and in my parents' love, but I do not feel home in that town. I feel watched by the eyes that perceive only who I used to be, or at least I project those eyes onto the faces of buildings, peering through the cracks in the pavements. That house is where I grew up, but Glasgow is where I grew, where I belong and am free. Free to be me, because the eyes of houses do not judge, but applaud. Free because I know the city, but it does not know me so well that I cannot change. I think home is the freedom felt in the knowing of a place and its people.